everyone, and welcome to another rubber dance design team tutorial and to another colour challenge for the month of February 2015. Is it the second month of the year already? So this is the arty card I'm going to show you how to make. It's an alternative Valentine's card and it's an alternative colour scheme set by the lovely Katie, and it is teal, maroon and brown. And I know the brown looks a bit black on my photograph, but it is teal, maroon and brown. And the stamps I used, well, the I Heart Art is a brand new set and it was brought to me today by the postman. And then I'm going to use two little pieces from two of the word sets, Think Again and Something Wonderful. So I started out by going through all my inks and embossing powders and coming up with the nearest that I had to this colour scheme. So for teal I'm going to be using the Adirondack Stream. For the sort of maroon colour I'm going to be using Cranberry. I've tried to match my embossing powders to them, but you'll see that I don't actually use the blue one in the end because it isn't tealy enough, it's more turquoise. And then I've got a cocoa and a potting soil ink that I will be using for the brown. So some brand new sets of stamps on my desk today. I've got this lovely botanicals, antique botanicals, and I've got I Heart Art, which is the ones that I'm going to be using today. You can see I've already been inking them up. I've got more on my fingers than on the stamps. And so this is the actual set that I'm going to be working with today. And I've also got Round in Circles. There are some other brand new sets as well, so pop over to rubberdance.com and check them out. And I'm also going to be using for this card sections of these greetings. I didn't have quite the greeting I wanted, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to make my own greeting out of one of the greetings from Something Wonderful and one of the greetings from Think Again. So in my head I wanted to create a kind of arty Valentine's card, because this is quite an alternative colour scheme that I'm using. I wanted something quite arty, and I wanted to make a card fold that was a little bit arty. So I have designed one myself. So it's based on an easel card, but it's a little bit more funky in its shape. So I'm going to show you how I did it so that perhaps you could make different shapes of your own once you see the sort of things that I considered as I went through making my prototype. So this is the prototype shape that I've made it in some orange card, and I'm going to show you how I made it using the card that I'm going to use for this actual Valentine's card that I'm going to be showing you how to make. So I've picked out my cardstock and I've used the three colours that are in the February colour challenge, so you can see them better here: the brown, the burgundy, the teal, and I'm going to be using cream as my base for my stamping. I'm going to apologise right at the beginning. I'm only going to be giving these dimensions in inches because you'll see that I do end up with some quite small measurements and it really would be awkward to work them out. But I'm starting by cutting each of my pieces of card in half, or should I say I'm cutting two pieces of cardstock out of my single piece of cardstock. One of them measures 7 inches by 5 3/4 inches and the other measures 8 inches by 5 3/4 inches, and I've done the same for each of the 3 other different colours of cardstock. So I'm going to show you first how to cut the piece that was going to sit upright on the easel card. So I'm going to make 2 little marks along the bottom edge of the cardstock to start with. So using a pencil, I'm going to measure 1 inch in from the left hand side and put a little pencil mark, and 1 inch in from the right hand side and put a little pencil mark. And then I'm going to use those 2 marks as the positions that I'm going to trim a little wedge of card off the left and right hand edges of this piece of card. So taking my metal edge ruler and my craft knife and tidying up a little bit, that's quite unusual, and then I'm going to cut from the top left hand corner down to the 1 inch mark on the left hand side. And then repeating that process from the right hand corner down to the 1 inch mark on the right hand side. So working again on the right hand side, I'm going to make a mark 1 inch down from the top right hand corner, and then I'm going to trim from the top left hand corner to that 1 inch mark, and that gives my distinctive arty shape for the top of this easel card. Now I'm working on the larger piece of cardstock, so that measured 5 3/4 by 8 inches, and I'm going to show you where to put the marks in order to make the shaped easel card base. So with the card in the portrait position and measuring down from the top, although I do start at the bottom, it's probably easier for you to start measuring from the top. I'm going to put 2 marks. So measuring down from the top of the card, and this is where I realise what I should be doing. So working on the right hand side of the card, I'm putting a mark at 2 inches and then another mark at 4 inches. Now they would be the normal marks if you were creating an easel card anyway. So measuring up from the base this time, trying to confuse everybody, the first mark is at 3 inches, then moving the ruler up a little bit, putting a mark at the 5 inch point, and then once again moving the ruler and putting another mark at the 7 inch. So that's 3 inch, 5 inch and 7 inches. Now on my scoreboard you can see I've got my middle line drawn in it so that I can see where that middle line is, and it comes in very useful for scoring from one side of the card to another when you're not doing it in a straight line. So I can put my pencil marks, the first 2 pencil marks, which is the 4 inch and 3 inch marks, and I can score from one side of the card to the other in a diagonal line. And then I can move the card up, and I'm going to score again at the next 2 marks, which were at the 6 inch and 5 inch points. So the final mark that I have on the card is one that we're going to cut. So I'm putting the pencil mark and the top corner of the card along my cutting line and just trimming off a wedge from the top of the card. So if there's a funny noise in the background, somebody upstairs is running the water and it really is hissing downstairs, but I'm not sure if it's going to show up on this voice over, so if it is, my apologies. I've got 2 score lines, so I'm folding them, both of them are mounting folds, and that forms a little TP or triangle shape which forms the easel card base. So the next thing that we want to work out is how we're going to trim away that outside section so that it doesn't hang over the edge of the card. So I worked it out, actually, I want to centre the card in the card base, but it actually is quite centred if I put it up against the left hand edge of the easel card base. So I'm going to use the left hand edge as is, and then I'm going to trim away the right hand edge. So I'm holding that piece of card right up against the right hand edge of the easel card base. Then folding the card flat, I'm going to use the right hand edge of the card front to draw a line along that little easel card base. And then I'm going to cut the 2 pieces in one go. So I'm folding the 2 top pieces together, and then I'm using that line as my guide to trim away the excess piece of the stand that I don't need. So again, using my metal ruler, not trying to cut through everything in one go. I'm going to make a couple of passes in order to do this, and I'm just going to trim it slightly shorter than I have drawn, and that way I can be sure that it's not going to poke out the edge of the card once it's in position. So I'm just carefully trimming down to the score line through those 2 layers of card, and then I can trim along that score line, and I am removing the actual score itself so that it looks a little bit neater from the actual base. So now you end up with this, and once that's in position, when the card's finished, it's all going to look nice and neat. The idea now is to cut the layers, each layer getting slightly smaller than the first, so roughly by about a 1/16 of an inch. Now I did try to do the brown piece the mathematical way, but it really didn't work. I made a real pig's ear of it, so I've come up with a much easier way to do it. And after all, that's what we like. We don't want anything too complicated when we're supposed to be crafting. And so I'm just using the brown piece. So I'm using the larger piece of card, and I'm drawing it on the piece that I'm going to cut smaller. So I'm just tracing around the outside edge, making sure the bottom edge is lined up. Once you've drawn around your piece that you're using as a template, you can shift the card slightly to the right by about 1/16 of an inch, and then you can draw that line a second time. Then you can move it down by about 1/16 of an inch and draw the top line. And I have already moved it to the right and drawn another line roughly about 1/16 of an inch in from the original shape. And then you can go about with your metal edge ruler and craft knife and cut out that shape. And once you've finished cutting it out, you should have a piece that is incrementally smaller than the brown piece that you started with. So I've got the teal sitting on top of the brown that sits on top of the burgundy. And then I want to do exactly the same principle on the cream cardstock. So I'm going to do it again on camera because you'll be able to see better on this cream exactly what I'm doing. So first of all, placing the teal and drawing around it, then moving the cardstock slightly to the left, just have to think about that there, by about 1/16 of an inch, and drawing around the shape, and then moving it slightly to the right, and again 1/16 of an inch, drawing around the shape, and the same for the top. So you can see the two lines that I've created, and now I'm going to cut the smaller shape. And this actual cream piece of cardstock is the piece that I will be stamping on. I've got a slightly messy mark there, so I'm just using my rubber to get rid of it. I think it's dirty fingerprints, or it might be a messy ruler, probably a messy ruler. And then I've got my final piece of card cut to size, so they all stagger down roughly about 1/16 of an inch smaller. So if you're working in centimetres, you can follow that principle and use whatever increments works best for centimetres. And now, using exactly the same principle, I'm going to cut the pieces that are going to sit on the card base. So starting out, I don't really need to draw around this because it's the same shape, but I'm just using it as a template just to get that 1/16 of an inch smaller. And the important part is putting that top line in and then dropping down again roughly by 1/16 of an inch. You can just about see the double line that I've created glinting in the lights, and then I'm trimming away that little section that will reveal a burgundy frame once it's in place on the base card. And then repeating that process on the teal cardstock and on the cream cardstock. So working on the top piece of card first, and of course I'm using my brand new stamps, and I'm just having a think about which ones to use. And I want one where I can cut a heart shape out of the design. I could do it with this one because it's got quite a thickly drawn line, but I end up picking the large scribbly heart and the slightly smaller scribbly heart. Starting out with the embossed elements and biggest squiggly heart. So I'm positioning that sort of bottom left of the card front, and I'm embossing it with a ruby embossing powder, which is, I've had it in my collection forever, and I doubt very much you can get the same colour. It's a Stampendous embossing powder, and you can see here that I'm catching the remnants on a scrap of paper, and you will see that I don't do a very good job of putting it back in the pot. I probably should have took this out and compiled a list of bloopers. So that's not the way to do it. That is the way not to do it. And so I'm picking up what I can and then just scooping the rest into the bin. So the next thing I wanted to do was create my own sentiment. I didn't have exactly what I wanted, so I'm going to choose to use the Today I Choose from the Think Again stamp set. I'm just trimming up the stamp, and I am going to use the word love from one of the stamps in the Something Wonderful set. I keep forgetting what that one's called. So I'm starting with the Today I Choose, and that's the top part of the stamp. So I'm just going to use a post-it note while I ink up that top section of the stamp, and I'm just tearing one in half because these are a bit long, and I'm just covering up the piece of the stamp that I don't want, and then inking up with my Versamark ink pad. That's a sticky ink that you use when you want to emboss. There are other makes that you can use, and I'm just stamping, trying to keep sort of visually, because these stamps aren't clear, whereabouts those words are on the stamp. And then this time I'm going to emboss with a cocoa, I think it's called Cocoa Bean Aurora, which is a cosmic shimmer embossing powder, which is a lovely chocolatey brown. So I've just got a little tiny dot at the bottom there and a couple of specks that I'm just removing with a fine paintbrush before I heat emboss the first part of my sentiment. So it's always worth looking, if you haven't got quite the right words and you like to mix or like the look of mix and matched fonts, this is quite a nice way to create a sentiment for a card. So the next thing I want is the word love. So putting this one back in its set, and then taking, just notice there's a small word love on this one, so I think I might use that as well. So this is from the Think Again set. I'm just trimming that up because I've not used that before. And then I'm going to use the word love on this sentiment. So I need a slightly bigger acrylic block for this one, and this one doesn't work quite as easily because the fonts do kind of merge one into the other, but I'm going to do the best I can with the masking, and then if I get any little strays of embossing powder I will knock them off with my paintbrush before I heat set this image. And I really liked this word love. It kind of reminds me of oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to advertise, but you know, that fizzy brown stuff that we all like to drink, or some of us like to drink. And I'm going to, again, I'm just keeping my finger where the word actually is to get my spacing right. So fingers crossed, I'm putting the word love, and I'm going to emboss that again in the ruby embossing powder. So it's not till this point that I know whether I've got it in the right place, and I have got a couple of strays, as you can see. So I'm just using the fine paintbrush to remove those little excess pieces that I don't need. And then again, heat setting with my heat gun. So my sentiment's in place. Now I need a few more love hearts, and this time I'm going to use the slightly smaller and plainer squiggly heart. Moving onto my craft mat, because I'm going to stamp some of these images off the edge of the card and I don't want the sticky all over my craft mat. And I'm just randomly stamping this slightly smaller heart all over, kind of trying to keep it slightly to the left hand side of the card. I'm leaving a little bit of white space on the right hand side. And then again with the ruby embossing powder, and then just knocking off any random pieces of embossing powder before I heat set. Now always remember, if you are leaving your embossing powder on your desk or your heat setting, make sure you do not point your heat gun at that embossing powder, otherwise it will be all over your desk. I've just realised that I've missed one right next to my thumb. Luckily I didn't put my thumb right in it. And then heat setting that final heart. And the design is coming together. So as I'm looking at the colours and thinking about the colour scheme, I want to bring some more of that teal onto the card front, and I also want some more of that lovely chocolatey brown. So using that little tiny word love, I'm going to put love in all of my hearts. And then I'm going to emboss those words with the cocoa bean embossing powder. And removing any strays and then heating with my heat gun. As the piece of card that's below this one is that lovely teal colour, I'm just removing a heart shape from the middle of that squiggle heart. So I'm just sort of following the rough shape of the original stamp, and I've just removed a little aperture from that card front so that I can see the teal card behind. I want to add a little bit of interest to that heart, so I'm just tracing around it with a pencil. Then I'm going to use one of these sort of splattery style hearts to give it some texture. So I'm going to stamp with the Versamark and then I'm going to emboss with a clear embossing powder. And you can see the texture that I've achieved doing that, and then you can see that texture through the aperture in the card front. So I've brought a little bit of teal onto that card front, but I think I want a little bit more, and I want a bit more of a frame around the card. So I'm really going for this arty look. So I'm thinking that I'll be able to use this stamp unmounted just to create a little bit of a splatter edge along my stock. What you can see now, once I've added the embossing powder, and I'm going a little bit thinner on the right hand edge where everything's a little bit lighter, and then I can go a little bit heavier along the other edges. So I'm just working my way around. If I get a little bit too much on, you can just knock it off with your paintbrush. And because I haven't got a mounted stamp, it means I can just roll it onto the edge of the cardstock and achieve that sort of random splattering of dots around the edge of my card. You can see I've just missed that top right hand corner, but I can go back once I've removed my fingerprints and fill that in once I've heat set this little section of embossing powder. So sometimes it's about looking at your stamps and seeing what other possibilities they have, and I found a couple for these stamps today. Now I want to create some real splatter, and I'm going to do that with a little bit of the Stream Adirondack ink, and then I'm tapping one paintbrush against another, just testing out the size of the dots. Don't want them too big. This is quite a fine paintbrush, just adding a little bit of water and then making sure that the majority of the splatters again are a little bit heavier on the left hand side of the card. They're still wanting a little bit more of that blue colour, so I'm creating a wash by adding more water to the ink, and then I'm just colouring in each of those little hearts. So once I've coloured them in, I'm just blotting them with a piece of kitchen roll. So I might have been a little bit wiser to wait till the little splatters were dry. So I do get a couple of little smudges on the right hand side, but hey ho, this is supposed to be an arty looking card, and I'm a messy artist. I think I've just put my hand on it. I think that was the trouble looking back at this video. So just keeping the ink nice and light, but it's just adding that little bit extra blue because at the moment it's just a little bit heavy on that burgundy colour. And then a couple more splatters for good measure and to help hide the smudgy ones. I think I'm happy with how that's turning out and ready to start work on the base. So I'm sticking my card layers together with glue. You could use double-sided tape if you want to. And then I'm just popping the first two layers together. I'm going to leave the red for a moment because I wasn't sure if I wanted to wrap a ribbon around this. You'll see that I changed my mind at the end, but for now I'm sticking these two layers together and I'm going to pop them onto my craft mat to make sure that they dry nice and flat. So then it's on with the card base. So starting out with that random sort of slightly speckly border, and you can see I'm just rolling my stamp onto the edge of the cardstock, and then again I'm going to be embossing with the ruby embossing powder. So just brushing off the strays that I don't want, and just taking the heat gun and heat setting the dotty frame, and you can see I've just got one more little piece to stamp and one little piece that I've missed. And again, getting rid of the strays before heat setting the frame around the base piece of card. The next piece I did off camera, and I used this very old tool. It was pre-buying punches, little Sizzix paddle punch. Work really well if you want to position hearts in a certain place. Punches don't always get to, and I'm trying to create the same look as the stamp by squiggling around each of those little heart shapes that I've punched out with my quickie glue pen, and I'm using that to emboss little squiggle pattern that I've put around each of those little hearts. And as I heat embossed them, I thought, actually, I think I'm going to put a third one in the left hand corner. Maybe not quite as good as the stamps, but I think you can see that it fits in with the style of the card. So the next step, a little puddle of that stream ink and a few little taps to create some splatters on the card base. And then I need the texture on the underneath piece of teal cardstock, so drawing around the hearts, and then again using the same little stamp that I used earlier. I'm just stamping over, being careful to avoid the area that's going to show around the outside of the teal cardstock, and then embossing the two little hearts with clear embossing powder, and this will show as texture through the little hearts that I've punched on the card base. And then gluing all the pieces together. And then it's time to put all the pieces together. So just removing a few pencil marks from the easel card base and then attaching the layers to what will be the front or the top of the base. I've cut myself a 1/2 inch strip of the burgundy card, and I'm just layering them up with ever decreasing pieces of the other colours that I've used. So I've got brown, then teal, and then finally a thin strip of cream. So that creates me a little strip that I'm going to use as the stopper for my easel card base. So I'm just cutting thin pieces of foam tape and just making sure I've got enough pieces to go right across my card base, and then I can put this piece into position and it matches my card, and I think it will just give that nice diagonal line across to emphasize the fact that this is slightly at an angle. So again, I can add the piece to the card base. I've decided not to go with a ribbon. I've got another little plan, and I'm attaching it to the bottom section of the card base. So just make sure everything's lined up and it's going to stand up on the card like so. And this little strip will hold that in place. So I can remove all the backing pieces and attach that across the card, trying to avoid those little heart apertures, and that will act as a stopper when the card is in the upright position. Just trimming it to size, and at this point I thought actually I might be able to use this little bit, but I decided it was a little bit heavy on the top section of the card, so I'm not going to use that, but I am going to add some splatter to the cream strip, because the cream strip, you can see, just looks a bit too neat and tidy considering the rest of the card. So I had to have a little quick think, and I'm just masking it off with a piece of scrap paper and a piece of scrap card that I'm rescuing out of the bin. And just flicking a couple of little splatters along the strip and all over the scrap paper. And it just tones it in a little better with the card design. And now at this point I switch on my heat gun because I want to add a couple of little embellishments to the card. So I went for a little rummage in my drawers for embellishments and found this little piece of old bracelet that has been broken for quite a long time, and I've trimmed off the little pieces that join it together. So I've got two little silver bound hearts that have got perfect coloured abalone shell in the middle, and they're going to make great embellishments for my card. Then I've got some tulle, and I'm just doubling it up, or I will be in a minute. And so I'm just folding it in half just to get a double layer, and then tying a little knot in the middle, and that way I get a lovely fan on each side of that knot. And I'm just trimming them off so both pieces are roughly the same length. So try to get the scissors in between the two layers and couldn't quite manage it, so I'm just snipping off the top and then fluffing those edges out to make a little bow shape, and then just trimming the other side to match. And I was thinking I'm either going to place it here on the heart, or I might just put it under the little phrase that I've got at the top of the card. So that's one little bow and heart, and then just making the second little tulle bow, so doubling up the layer and then just tying a knot, and then trimming both ends to roughly the same length. And then it's out with the heat gun and on with the tulle. So I'm just putting a tiny dot underneath the knot of the tulle. Be careful when you press down that it doesn't come through and get your fingers while it's still hot. And then I'm just putting one of those little heart shapes right in the middle of the tulle bow or tulle knot. So I'm happy with that piece there, and then I'm going to put another piece more or less directly underneath on the little strip that holds the pop-up card in place. So just holding that down while the glue goes off, and then adding the little heart, which you can't see now, underneath on the knot of the tulle. And then last but not least, a few little touches of bling. So I'm starting out with some slightly bigger dots in as near to the teal as I can get them, a little bit nearer the tulle colour. And then using some glossy accents, I'm just adding some slightly smaller gems. There you have it, another idea for a Valentine's card, or just a token of your affection to someone you love. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing how to use these gorgeous brand new stamps from Rubber Dance. So I heart art. I'll leave you a link at the end of this video which will take you back to my blog. As you know, you have to go via my blog to Rubber Dance, where you can check out the stamps and you can join in this month's February colour challenge. So again, it's teal, burgundy and brown, and you can make whatever you like. There isn't a theme set of love, but you don't have to use that if you don't want to, but I'm sure that you'll have lots of fun creating, and of course you can win stamps. So you too could be using a stamp set. Ooh. Don't drop your card. You could be using a stamp set like the one that I've been using today. So at the risk of repeating myself, check out the links at the end of this video. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, the share button, and I look forward to crafting with you again very, very soon. Until next time, thank you for watching. This link will take you back to my blog where you'll find the link to the colour challenge over at Rubber Dance, and you'll be able to find those gorgeous stamps over there too. Click on this link if you want to see more inspiration using Rubber Dance stamps, including this gorgeous card using the hibiscus set of stamps. Alternatively, why not click on this link and check out my scrapbooking videos. I show you how to make this fun faux zipper using tin foil and a pop can ring pull. And here we are, or here is Callum and Ivan anyway, enjoying trying on the hats at Epcot in Disney. And last but not least is the link to my Etsy shop, where you'll find workshops over there that I sell, and I will talk you through making projects like this one. Why not make a gorgeous trinket box to put something in and a matching card?